Hi everyone, here we are. It's 8 p.m. I thought, as usual, I'll start with a story and how everything is going to come together today. As you know, I love telling stories about my childhood. And one of the things is my father went to Iowa University to do his master's in his late 30s, after he was married, he has two kids, and then he went to do his further studies in University of Iowa. And when he went there, obviously this is in the 50s, early 50s, he went there. And there were hardly any Indian students, hardly any Indian food. My father, being a vegetarian, didn't know anyone there. It's a cold place. But my father was a very social person. So he met a lot of people and all that stuff. And he'd always tell us stories of his time there and how when he went to the first dinner, there were like 30 dishes, but not a single one of them was vegetarian. But he always told me about two people. One is a lady, now I'm kind of forgetting, I think her name was Mrs. Ann, who was married to an Indian man and was always the host for all the Indians who came there. She would take them to her home, feed them dinners, and get them adjusted to Iowa and all that stuff. So he was very fond of her. He would keep writing to her and show her her pictures, etc. And the other one was Dr. Jackson, who was his professor there. I mean, remember, he went there in the early 50s, and he kept up that relationship all the way through. So in late 80s, when I was in America and I was doing a long trip from East Coast to the West Coast, I actually made it a point to go through Iowa and meet that lady. And she was, kind of bedridden. She was in a retirement home. And my father was so happy that I got to meet her. And the reason I'm telling this story is that I've learned from him to create relationships and hold on to them for a long time, because you never know what becomes important for you over time, because at the end of the day, the relationships are the only things you hold on to. And for my father, going to America, going to Iowa in his late 30s was so important because it showed him a world that didn't exist for him in India. And he was so far, reaching, such a unconventional thinker. And I think that's because of his early exposure to people who were so different from him, whether it was Mrs. Ann or Dr. Jackson or the roommates that he had or his colleagues. I mean, he took a ship, he traveled for 20 days or 25 days, went from India to America and met this whole plethora of people who were so different from him. And he always said that was very, very crucial for him in his growth. So in later years, when my aunts and uncles would say, no, you can't do this or you can't do that, he was always the one who supported me because he thought about things very, very differently. So that's why I think as we are sitting here, we are looking at what's going on, it is important to understand the perspective of what's happening in other parts of the world. What are people thinking? What are people like? And what are they going through? So that's why we wanted to bring you someone from Latin America. JP runs a private equity firm, Pampa Capital. He's been doing private equity for over 25 years. He went to all the top schools all over the world. And he's a very successful investor from Latin America. And he's part of the INK community. He was with us in Jaisalmer last year. And we formed this amazing bond with him and with his whole team, etc. So I wanted to bring him on board to tell us what's happening in Latin America. So if you give me a second, I'll join him. Okay, there he is. Just be with us in a minute or so. So, and also, JP, I met JP through Rajan Anandan, who's who used to be with Google, who's with Sequoia Capital now, and his wife Radhika. So they
Hey,
introduced
Lakshmi.
me. Hi, JP.
How are you?
So it's all a matter of connections. I was just telling them how I met you through Rajan and Radhika. And
Yeah,
it's
it was,
Radhika's wife and JP's wife were roommates, and they've all been college friends. And so, big thanks and shout out to Radhika and Rajan for introducing me to JP. And so, here he is. So, where are you now, JP?
I'm
Which
in
part
Buenos
of
Aires. I'm in Buenos
are you
Aires.
in?
I've been
Yeah.
in lockdown for, at this point, is 16 days.
Okay.
Official lockdown here in Argentina. As you know, I'm Colombian, but I've been here in Argentina for a while, almost 10
Uh-huh.
years, before living in the US. And we're living something very similar to obviously what I'm hearing everybody. I was hearing your conversation yesterday with Shayamal, and we're all living this emotions and this isolation at the same time and all together. Obviously, very connected, but very isolated. Yeah.
So you
Um,
must be talking a lot with your portfolio companies and all that stuff. So give us a little bit of sense of what's happening in Argentina right now. I mean, there's, politically also there's a lot of stuff going on, and obviously this is a whole new journey you're on. So tell us a little bit of how is the situation there, and are people following the lockdown pretty seriously, or just give us a little bit of sense of what's going on.
Yeah, well, the people are following we've been quite early in Argentina and in Latin America, most of the countries impose lockdowns pretty early. So somewhere around 15 days ago, started the isolation, and then 5 or 6 days afterwards, it was complete lockdown. The big exceptions have been Mexico and Brazil, which they've been quite late in terms of doing that. And there's been a huge discussion in terms of how you deal, especially with the formal sector. And when you have such high levels of poverty, which I'm obviously in India, you're also experiencing this, how do you eventually make these tough choices in which the cure doesn't end up being worse than the disease, you know? So I think that's part of the discussion going on, but people have been following the lockdowns. The number of cases and deaths are not too high yet. Brazil has been spiked a bit. But I'm quite worried because it's hitting this moment in Latin America, which is in a quite fragile situation at this point, because it's not only been the health emergency, but as well, it's been the economic isolation, and you also have been seeing a drop in commodity prices. So the economic impact is going to be huge. But we're experiencing something very similar. Hopefully, we're going to come out, and the flattening of the curve is going to actually work out. But still, we don't know that. Still, we're a couple of weeks from the peak.
So what are the kind of companies you've been involved in, JP? Because I know that you're looking a lot into agri space, food production, and things like that. So tell me a little bit about what are some of the portfolio companies you have? What are the specific situations they're looking at? And also, I think out of every catastrophe comes some opportunities also. So, what do you feel? You know, is going to be the economy there? What are some of the new needs that are going to come up now with what's happening?
Yeah, well, at this point, actually, I'm actually quite disinvested in terms of my portfolio companies. Actually, we were quite invested a year or so ago, and we were involved mainly in companies that provides kind of the picks and shovels for the ag sector. We were very much
Sorry, say it
into
again. A company what?
to provide kind of inputs and equipment to
Right.
the agribusiness, the kinds of picks and shovels approach.
Uh-huh.
So we had agricultural equipment companies focused on precision farming, mainly spraying. We were focused on seed companies that were focused on breeding. We were focused, and we still had a company, a logistic company focused on moving commodities using trains and trucks. And before that, we had been involved in agricultural production, basically land and basic crops. But we had basically exited that some time ago. And in a way, we ended up selling because obviously we're a fund on that, but we were quite concerned in terms of kind of where the system is going, and that's something that I've been focusing a lot in terms of really how this paradigm is shifting in terms of how to produce things in the advent of new technologies and obviously new ways of doing things. And one thing that we've been experiencing in Latin America is that kind of the system in terms of is not working in certain senses. You're at some point, I used to think that obviously you work hard and you focus on your companies and you grow them up. But one thing that we're seeing is that we're finding certain limitations to reach scale and growth in many of those companies because, and I think it's mainly a mindset issue in the region. So I've been trying to understand that better in the last year, and that's why I was always speaking to you in terms of how do you change perceptions and mindsets in the region to eventually solve problems instead of just basically being paralyzed by them.
And how is it in terms of, I mean, especially when you take the agri, some of the businesses that you are looking at, how is the food production, supply, all those things just internally within the country or maybe even across the region in general? Is this a sector that needs a lot of working, or it's something that's working pretty well? Just give us a little bit of insight into it.
Well, the system is essentially, it's working for the moment quite well. I think it's too early to tell, but we're not seeing any kind of clogging or issues in the supply chain for the moment. I think in terms of the non-essential activities, I think the government has been quite good in terms of keep them working. I think that there's some more structural issues that need to be solved in the long term, but for the moment, the sector has been moving. Obviously, it means that it's going to be impacted nonetheless, but probably less than other sectors that are basically less non-essential to what you're seeing right now. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about like actually today I was looking at a Twitter thing of, I think Nicholas Taleb, the person who wrote Black Swan, has put this tweet of, countries that have used masks and countries that have not used masks, like countries like Japan, South Korea, blah, blah, etc., whose curve is kind of like this, and the countries did not use masks, like Italy or US or, UK, where the curve is kind of like this,
Yeah.
So there is a lot of, ins and outs going on what mask is important, mask is not important, and all these kinds of stuff. So how is it over there when you go out? I mean, are you allowed to go out for groceries and things like that? When you go out, are people wearing masks? Or, how is the situation outside?
Well, the situation outside is people are being careful. They're keeping their distances when they go out. When we have gone out, actually, there's been not long queues. Some people are wearing masks, but I would say most of them are not. And I think that the government has been quite good in terms of an information campaign of how it's doing, how you should do it, and eventually keep prevention. But to be completely honest, we're at this point kind of in a very small area that actually is a kind of privileged area, and it's difficult to know how it's working in other parts. So it's been working well in where I am, but I'm not sure how it's working. I know there's certain parts of the city, and especially Poor parts are really the isolation is not being taken very seriously, not because they don't think that, but obviously many people need to go out and work. And the government is trying to be much more stringent in terms of putting imposes and penalties. But for the moment, things are relatively manageable.
And also everybody who's online, if you have any question, write it in your comment section, and I can ask JP. Feel free to do that. And I see my sister from England has joined, and some of my neighbors, people have joined. So welcome to all of you. So JP, one of the things also I want to talk to you about, you came to India, we spent time together, and you feel that there's an incredible opportunity for the two countries to work together a lot. So what was your impression of, when you were in India, and what did you take away with you, and in what way would you like to build bridges with India?
Yeah, well, I came back very impressed, and I think that one of the things that I'm really focusing on, and part of what I mentioned in the concern that I was talking about, is that I'm trying to find ways, how do we eventually shift to a mindset in terms of really focus on productivity here in our region, because it's been very focused on this kind of abundance mindset in which we believe we're very rich in natural resources, but we've been very bad in terms of just really squeezing as much as we can from what we have, and we've been very inefficient on that. And I think that India has positioned itself in a place that is becoming an alternative in terms of production of certain technology and software to China and the US. And I think that it's built an enviable position in software and in technology, which I think is very valuable here in Latin America. So I think that that's one thing that it's a bridge that I've been trying to build in terms of how we can take good solution and good ideas that we can implement here to become more productive. That's one. And at the same time, trying to figure out from our part of the world that what we can also bring in terms of good ideas and products to India. Obviously, I think that Latin America has a position in terms of producing natural resource and wealth in terms of doing things that, and in agriculture we're doing, and that's something that we can eventually also bridge and bring to the other side. So actually been speaking with several of your fellows and change makers that are reinventing, for example, agricultural supply chains, and trying to speak out how eventually some of the knowledge we have on this part of the world can help that. I think that there's an enormous opportunity going forward after this, which was already on the way in terms of this, what they call this resource revolution. I think that we already have, we're really inefficient in terms of how we use resources, water, in terms of production, infrastructure, and at the same time, all the technologies to use them several times better are already in place. It's just a matter of just innovating in the business models. So I've been trying to learn and see how we can innovate on that, and just try to change that mindset to become more productive, because I believe that there's no other way that we can do it. And kind of the current paradigm is not working. And we're in a moment in which kind of the wealth gap in Latin America is probably the biggest in any region in the world. And if we don't find a way to solve that gap and I think that's another area in terms of getting a lot of the growth and development to people that don't have, it simply is going to be an unsustainable system. No matter, it's no longer a matter of just being profitable, not profitable. It's just a matter of survival. So I think those are the kind of things I've been looking at.
Yeah. So thank you, JP, for your time. And, JP and I have been talking to see what sort of bridges can we build between India and Latin America, and how we can take some of the ideas from here to there and vice versa, bring ideas from there to here. and create a much better connection. So we'll continue to post on our website, etc., about what's going on, and so we'll continue it. So thank you so much, JP. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Lakshmi.
Bye.
Bye.